Welcome, everyone, to today's podcast of Personal Growth Recipes with your host, Ron Denner. Now, this is going to be the first of a two-part series on the 80-20 principle and how it applies to our lives. You know, the 80-20 principle has been around a long time, and it's really based on a book by Richard Cook that really illustrates the secret to success by what I call achieving more with less. You know, the 80-20 principle can and really should be used by every intelligent person in their daily life, by every organization, by every social grouping and form of society. And this is going to be the first of a two-part series on this because I have a lot of information on this I want to share. So next week I'll be doing the second episode of this under Personal Growth Recipes. So let's get started. Let's begin. You know, the pattern underlying the 80-20 principle really was discovered in 1897, over 100 years ago, by an Italian economist, and his name, I love the name, it rhymes, Vilfredo Pareto, easy to remember. His discovery is now known most commonly as the Pareto principle. You know, maybe you've heard it before, the Pareto principle. So what did Vilfredo Pareto, I love that name, discover? You know, he happened to be looking at patterns of wealth and income in 19th century England. And he found that most income and wealth went to a minority of people in his samples. You know, perhaps there was nothing very surprising in this, but he also discovered two other facts that he thought were really highly significant. One, that there was a consistent mathematical relationship between the proportion of people as a percentage of the relevant population and the amount of income or wealth that this group enjoyed. So let's kind of simplify this. If 20% of the population enjoyed 80% of the wealth, then you could reliably predict that 10% would have, say, 65% of the wealth, and 5% would have 50%. You know, the key point is not the percentages, but the fact that the distribution of wealth across the population was predictably unbalanced. Pareto's other finding was that the pattern of imbalance was repeated consistently whenever he looked at data referring to different time periods or different countries. The significance of the 80-20 principle really lay dormant for a whole generation. While a few economists, especially in the United States, realized its importance, it really wasn't until after the Second World War that two parallel yet completely different pioneers began to make waves with the 80-20 principle. There was a Harvard professor in 1949 that used population statistics, books, and industrial behavior to prove the 80-20 principle or close to it. For example, he analyzed all the Philadelphia marriage licenses granted in 1931 in a 20-block area. What he found is that 70% of the marriages occurred between people who lived within 30% of the distance of each other. Now, the other person was an industrial engineer who applied the 80-20 principle to improve the manufacturing industry. As an example, he discovered 20% of the products manufactured by a typical company accounted for about 80% of the sales. You know, in the internal combustion engine, 80% of the energy is wasted in combustion and only 20% gets to the wheels. So this industrial engineer, he helped Japan rebuild their economy after World War II with this knowledge. It's pretty important stuff here. This engineer by the name of Joseph Juran later would move back to the United States, and he would use this same knowledge to help American manufacturers. Why is the 80-20 principle so important? Well, it's so valuable because it's really what I call counterintuitive. We tend to expect that all causes will have roughly the same significance, that all customers are equally valuable, that every product and every dollar of sales revenue is good as any other. That all employees in a particular category have roughly equivalent value. That each day or week or year we spend has the same significance. That all our friends have roughly equal value to us. That all problems have a large number of causes, so that it's really not worth isolating a few key causes. That all opportunities are of roughly equal value, so we treat them all equally. Why should you care about the 80-20 principle? Whether you realize it or not, the principle applies to your life, to your social world, and even to the place where you work. And understanding the 80-20 principle is going to give you some great insight into what is really happening in the world around us. So let's explore the 80-20 principle in the business world. Let's start there. If a company finds that 80% of its profits come from 20% of its customers, what they ought to do is they should really use this information to concentrate on keeping that 20% happy and increasing the business that's carried with them. Or if they find that 80% of its profits come from 20% of its products, they really should put more of their effort into really selling more of those products. And the same applies to non-business applications of the 80-20 principle. If you analyze your leisure activities and found that 80% of your leisure enjoyment came from 20% of the activities, which only took 20% of your leisure time, it would just make sense to increase the time allocation from that 20% up to at least 80%. Transportation is another example. 80% of traffic jams occur on about 20% of the roads. So a sensible reaction would be for, say, traffic engineers to pay particular attention to, traffic phasing of those 20% of the jam creating intersections. And it would probably also make sense for us to plan ahead, right, and avoid these 20% of the jam-packed roads if possible. Let's explore how you can apply the 80-20 principle to your personal life, really to give you more freedom, right? And, the 80-20 principle can allow you to work less and really at the same time to earn and enjoy more. The only price is that you need to do some serious, what I call 80-20 thinking. This is going to yield a few key insights that if you can act on them, they could change your life. The objective of 80-20 thinking is to generate action, which is going to make sharp improvements in your life and hopefully that of other people. 80-20 thinking is different from the kind of thinking that prevails today. There's a great saying I love. It's action drives out thoughts. Action drives out thoughts. Our objective as 80-20 thinkers is to leave action behind. Just to do some quiet thinking, mine a few small pieces of precious insight, and then act. So we want to act on a very selective few objectives that we just narrow down, which will produce terrific results without using up really so much of our energy and resources. 80-20 thinking discovers where conventional wisdom is wrong, as it generally is. Progress springs from identifying the waste, starting with our daily life, and then just trying, hopefully doing something about it here. That requires you to work out why most other people are doing things wrongly or to a fraction of their potential. If your insights are not unconventional, you are not thinking 80-20. 80-20 thinking really seeks pleasure. It believes that life is meant to be enjoyed. So who wouldn't want that, right? Life is meant to be enjoyed. Now, this may not seem controversial, but most people do not do the simple things that would be conducive to their happiness, even when they know what they are. Most people fall into the following traps. They spend a lot of time with people that they just don't like much. They do jobs that they're not enthusiastic about. They use most of their free time on activities they do not greatly enjoy. And really the reverse is also true. They do not spend most time with the people they like the most. They do not pursue the kind of career that they would really most like to do. They do not use most of their free time on the activities they enjoy the most. I really want to expand on a few more insights for your personal life. 80% of achievement and happiness takes place in about 20% of our time. And those peaks can really be expanded greatly. Our lives are profoundly affected for good or bad by a few events and just a few decisions. These few decisions are often taken by default, though, rather than conscious choice. We kind of let life just happen to us rather than shape our own lives. And we can really improve our lives dramatically by recognizing the turning points and making the decisions that will make us happy and productive. Everyone can achieve something significant. The key is not effort, but really just finding the right thing to achieve. You and I are just hugely more productive at some things than at others, but we dilute the effectiveness of this by doing too many things where our comparative skill set is nowhere near as great. Most of our failures in life are in races for which other people enter us, and most of our successes come from races that we ourselves want to enter. We really fail to win most races because we enter too many of the wrong ones, their races, not ours. Few people take objectives really seriously. They put average effort into just too many things rather than, superior thought and effort into a few important things. People who achieve the most are selective as well as determined. Most people spend most of their time on activities that are just of low value to themselves and to others. The 80-20 thinker escapes this trap and really can achieve more of the few, what I call those higher value objectives without really not much more effort. One of the most important decisions somebody can make in life is their choice of what I call their allies or their friends. Almost nothing can be achieved without allies, especially in the business world. And unfortunately, most people do not choose their allies carefully or even at all. The allies just somehow arrive. This is really what I call a serious case of letting life happen to you. And most people have the wrong allies. And most also have too many, and they just simply don't use them properly. 80-20 thinkers really choose a few allies carefully, and they build their alliances carefully to achieve their specific objectives. Money that's used rightly can be really a significant change allow you so much leverage in your life, give you so much more leverage, what I call, as long as money is subordinated to lifestyle and happiness, there's really no harm in this ability. They say money isn't everything, right? But, few people spend enough time and thought cultivating their own happiness. They seek indirect goals like money and promotion that really may be difficult to obtain and will prove that when you finally do attain them, they're just an extremely inefficient source of happiness. And not only is happiness not money, it's not even like money. Money not spent can be saved and invested. Through the magic of compound interest, it can be multiplied, right? But let's look at the difference here. Happiness not spent today does not lead to happiness tomorrow. You can't save and invest it. Happiness, like the mind, is going to deteriorate if it's not exercised or used today. 80/20 thinkers know what generates their happiness, and they pursue it consciously, cheerfully, and intelligently, using happiness today to build and multiply happiness tomorrow. And the best place to start 80/20 thinking about achievement and happiness is the subject of time. Our society's appreciation of the quality and the role of time is very poor. Many people intuitively understand this, and several business executives have sought redemption in what I call the form of time management. But these executives are just kind of tinkering around the edges. Our whole attitude towards time needs to really be transformed. We don't need time management. We need a time revolution. See, it's not that we are short of time or even that we have too much of it. It's really the way we treat time, even the way we think about it. That's the problem and the opportunity. For those of you who have not experienced a time revolution, it's the fastest way to make a giant leap in both happiness and effectiveness. Much of what we do is of low value. Some small fragments of our time are much more valuable than all the rest. 80% of achievement is attained in 20% of the time taken. 80% of the time spent leads to only 20% of the output value. And 80% of happiness is experienced in about 20% of life. Think about that. And 80% of time contributes only about 20% of our happiness. Now think about this. If we make good use of only 20% of our time, there's no shortage of it. You and I need to spend a few minutes or hours really reflecting on this. What I would suggest you do is just go for a long walk or take several walks and really, really reflect on whether your use of time is unbalanced or it's out of balance. What most people are going to find is that their use of time is really not balanced very well, including myself. The first step, and I've said this in other podcasts, is self-awareness, that we need to rethink how we spend our time and to change the way we think about the time itself. Now, let's stop here for a minute. This is not referring to time management. A whole cottage industry was formed on time management beginning really in the business world. Time management is really about prioritizing our to-do list into A, B, C, D. We've all probably been there, right? In truth, most people end up classifying about 60 or 70% of their activities as A or B priorities that we just think we have to do this. It's got to get done. And they conclude that what they are really short of is time. So what do you end up with? They end up with better planning, longer working hours, and greater frustration. And one of the results of this type of mentality in society is that it divides us into two types of people in general. Those who have money but no time to enjoy it, and those who have time but no money. One of the two. There's really no shortage of time. We only make good use of about 20% of our time. The 80/20 principle says that if we double our time on the top 20% of activities, we could conceivably achieve 60% more right now. And this is really light years away from the world of time management. The 80/20 principle treats time as a friend and really not as an enemy. The 80/20 principle says that we should act less. Once again, remember that action drives out thoughts. It's because we have so much time that we squander it. Think about this. The most productive time on a project is usually the last 20%, simply because the work has to be completed before a deadline. Another great example, a lot of us watch football in the NFL. How many football games are won in the last 2 minutes because one team has one last chance to win? So, it's not a shortage of time that should worry us, but the tendency for the majority of time to be spent in these low quality ways. Speeding up or being more efficient is not going to help us. Such ways of thinking are more the problem than the solution. I'm going to give you some illustrations that you can apply to your life. Number one, let's take your work life. It's vital in your work life. It's vital to do something that you like. I know it's not easy, but there's little value in doing things that you don't enjoy doing for a living. If you really want to move into the top 20% income bracket, the one common denominator is that these 20% enjoy what they do or it matches up with their strengths. You may have to acquire more job skills or look at a career change if you don't like what you do for a living. If that's your goal, that may not be your goal. That's fine. Many financially successful individuals really continue, and I know a lot of them, they continue working into their 80s and beyond because work becomes like play. That should be a goal for all of us, I think. Work becomes like play. Number two, identify the 20% that gives you 80%. What do I mean by that? Well, for happiness, identify what I call your happiness islands. Your happiness islands. These are small amounts of time that have contributed to the greatest percentage of your happiness. If you do this sometime, take a clean sheet of paper and just write happiness islands at the top. And list as many as you can remember. And repeat the procedure for your unhappiness islands. And then once again, repeat this procedure for achievement. Identify your achievement islands, those short periods of time when you've achieved a much higher ratio of value to time than during the rest of your week. We have our more productive times, right? List separately your achievement desert islands, unfortunately, those periods of lowest productivity during the week. And just make a note of what you did and the time of the day that you did them. Once again, remember self-awareness. That's really the key here. And when you've identified your happiness and achievement islands, you really want to spend more time in these and similar activities. Your basic objective after you've identified these is to increase the 20% of time that you spend on these activities as much as possible. And just do it incrementally. Start by trying to increase that 20% up to, say, 40% within the first year. That's a good goal. Within the next year, try to go from 20% to 40%. I want to close with a list of what I call the 10 most low-value uses of time, and then I'm going to shift over to what I call the 10 most highest value uses of time. So let's get the worst ones out of the way first, right? The 10 lowest things here. Things you're not good at doing, things that you've always done the same way, things you don't enjoy, things that are always interrupted, things few people are interested in, things that have already taken twice as long as you originally expected, things where your collaborators are unreliable or low quality, things that have a predictable cycle, and answering the telephone. There obviously some phone calls you're going to have to take, but the phone can be a big time waster. Here's 10 high-value uses of your time. Things that advance your overall purpose in life. The things you have always wanted to do. Things already in the 2080 relationships of time to results. Innovative ways of doing things that promise to multiply the results. The things other people tell you that can't be done. The things other people have done successfully in a different arena. Things that use your own creativity. Things that you can get other people to do for you with relatively little effort on your part. anything with a high quality collaborator or collaborators who have already applied the 80-20 rule of time effectively. The things for which it is now or never. One final thought on this subject of time and the 80-20 principle. Like I said before, don't look at it as all or none. If it seems overwhelming, just really begin with baby steps. Just try to identify one or two activities and just go from there. Okay, just take it one step at a time, as they say. And I really hope taking these first steps can hopefully transform your time and your life. This concludes today's podcast. And like I said, I'm going to be doing a follow-up second podcast on the 80-20. And I'll expand on some more knowledge and information on that in next Wednesday's podcast. So if you enjoyed this podcast, please be sure to like, share, and leave a comment down below. I invite you to follow me on Twitter at Ron Denner. Please follow me on Instagram at DennerRon. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, Ron Denner. Subscribe to Personal Growth Recipes on Apple Podcasts. And please give us a 5-star rating if you've been enjoying it. And also, I invite you to like and share our Facebook page at facebook.com/Personal Growth Recipes. So, with that, be sure to tune in next Wednesday for, like I said, my second follow-up on this podcast on the 80-20 principle. I'm going to be sharing some more different kinds of applications on this, how we can try to apply it to our lives, okay? And this is Ron Denner, your host for Personal Growth Recipes, serving up and signing off.